If you only read a few books in your life, make sure these are it. What's up, guys? It's Jeff. Today I'm talking about the 6 books that changed my life. I'll give you a brief summary of each of them, but more importantly, I'll tell you exactly how they changed my life. I'll also talk about the 2 stocks that changed my life and the powerful tool I use to analyze stocks. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe and turn on the notification bell. I put a lot of work into these videos, and all I ask in return is for you to sit back, relax, and smash that like button. It really does help the YouTube algorithm, and I really appreciate it. Now, as always, I'm not a financial advisor, and this is not financial advice. So whenever anybody asks me what factors I think have contributed the most to my success, I always credit my reading habit. I've read about 1 book a week on average for the past 20 years. So that's about 50 books a year for the past 20 years, so roughly 1,000 books. Now, I say that not to impress you, but rather to demonstrate that the books I'm about to talk to you about are really in the top 1 percentile of everything I've read. Now, I've highlighted about 25 books in all, with the first 6 really being the ones that had the biggest impact on my life. So I'll spend the most time on them, of course. And before I do this, I do have a couple of tips for you. Number 1, I get all my books online from Amazon, like I'm sure most of you do. It's obviously super convenient. They have pretty much every book ever created, both new and used. And of course, you got free and quick shipping. Now, I've included an affiliate link below for your convenience in case you want to buy any of these books. And for full disclosure, I may get a small commission if you do end up buying any of them from the links. Number 2, I only order 1 book at a time. I've found in the past that if you have too many books to choose from, you end up procrastinating and not reading any of them. So buy 1, finish it, and then buy your next one. Tip number 3, I get my books in hardcover whenever possible, and I do that for 2 reasons. Number 1, they look great when I store them in my library, and number 2, hardcovers are much more durable, and I generally reread my favorite books over and over again. All right, let's get straight into it. The 6 books that changed my life. Number 1, now this is a tie between The Conquest of Happiness by Bertrand Russell and A Guide to the Good Life, The Ancient Art of Stoic Joy by William Irvine. Now, these books are so good that they are the only books I've ever given people as gifts. Now, what's so great about them is that they teach you the art and science of happiness. And like anything worthwhile in life, happiness isn't easy to find or maintain. And I believe that we're not biologically designed to be happy. If you think about evolutionary science, we're actually biologically designed to be predisposed to emotions like fear and hunger. That's for our basic survival. And it's also an evolutionary feature of the survival of the fittest, which of course Darwin first taught us. Now, to be perfectly honest, I don't think those features benefit most humans living in our modern society today. So understanding emotions and how to make yourself happy is truly a science, and one that nobody has ever taught, which I think is just crazy to me because this should be required reading for everybody. Now, this book isn't for people who suffer from depression. This book is literally targeted at every single human being on this planet, regardless of how happy or unhappy you are, because nobody on this planet is at 100% happiness level. There's always room to become a little bit happier. Now, there's too much good stuff in these books for me to even attempt a summary, so please just trust me and read them. They're probably the most important books I've ever read for my mental health and well-being. I've always been a pretty happy-go-lucky guy, but I'm no different from anyone else, and I'm not immune to a lot of what life and society throws at us. So these books have been a calming and reassuring presence in my life. Number 2, Seeking Wisdom, From Darwin to Munger by Peter Bevlin. Now, this is a very dense book, and it may not be an easy read for many, but it has so many useful concepts across several disciplines that I feel like it's an actual must read. It's a multidisciplinary exploration of wisdom through the lens of investing, psychology, and decision making. Again, this one is jam-packed with gems of wisdom, so it's impossible for me to summarize, but I can tell you that this has definitely made me a better investor and decision maker. It's also changed the way I think about life decision making in general, and the innate flaws of human psychology and how to correct them. Number 3, Competitive Strategy by Michael Porter. For those of you who don't know him, Michael Porter is one of the most famous professors at Harvard Business School, and he teaches competitive strategy. And he's become famous for Porter's 5 Forces. Now, Porter's 5 Forces is a super powerful tool, and it's the analysis that I use in every single investment I've ever made, and I credit it for my investing success. So I'll go through it really quickly, and I'll actually do a little case study with you guys. So number 1 is the threat of substitution. Now, what does this mean? This means the threat of a new product or new technology replacing yours. So think about the technology in music over the years. We went from tapes to CDs to now digital. That's the threat of substitution concept. Number 2, threat of new entrants. This, the other way you can think about it, are barriers to entry into your industry. Is it easy for people to just start a business and compete with you? Are there barriers for them to be able to compete? And are there barriers to success? Can they come into your industry and win and be successful? Number 3, competitive rivalry. Now, this one's very related to the threat of new entrants, because if it's easy to join an industry, then chances are there's going to be a lot of competitive rivalry. If there's only a few competitors, then competitive rivalry will be much lower. The other thing is, how do competitors compete? Do they do it based on price, or do they do it based on quality, or offering different features and services? Number 4, supplier power. The first thing here is to understand who are the suppliers, what is the nature of the product that's being supplied, and again, what are the competitive dynamics of your supplier's industry? Can you get this from a lot of different people, or are there really a few limited suppliers? And then finally, number 5, buyer power. Who are your customers? How badly do they need your product, and can they get it from somewhere else? All right, so now let's use Google as an example. Let's run through these. So number 1, threat of substitution, right? So Google is a search engine, as I'm sure you all know. There really isn't a technology or even a new technology on the horizon that I can think of that would displace or be a threat to substitute Google's product. But maybe there's potential threats from, competitors like Amazon or Shopify or Facebook, or maybe there might be the threat of government interference. Those are really the only things that I can think about. But overall, there really isn't much of a threat of substitution for their search product. Number 2, threat of new entrants. Now, the barriers to entry in the search market are extremely high. And so that's why when you look at the competitive dynamics, Google has about 92% global market share in English search. The second competitor is Bing, and they have about 3% market share. So what you can see here is there haven't been many competitors that have been able to get in, and the few that have not been successful. So the barriers to entry are super high, and the barriers to success are even higher. Now, the interesting thing to understand here, too, is that Bing is owned by Microsoft. So Microsoft, one of the biggest companies of all time, with seemingly unlimited resources, tried to take on Google and failed. And then number 3, competitive rivalry. Well, in search, we just went through it. There really isn't any rivalry. Google owns that market, and it's really just Bing, but they're much, much smaller. So you really have to go outside of search to start to find competitors, and then you have to expand it. So who competes with Google? It's really other people that are competing for advertising dollars, from old media, which would be anything from TV, radio, magazines, and newspapers, to new media. And in new media, again, you've got competitors like Facebook and social media. And then supplier power. Well, when you think about who supplies Google, it's really the 7 billion people on the planet. And we are supplying to them free of charge because they're providing a very valuable product to us. So I don't see that going anywhere anytime soon. And then finally, number 5, buyer power. Now, who buys from Google? It's basically advertisers. So again, if they want to be included in search, they really have nowhere else to go but Google. Now, if they want to go more broadly to advertisers, again, we touched upon this, they can go to old media or they can go to new media. So they do have a choice, but it's really between Google and maybe Facebook. So again, there's a natural oligopoly here. So after you run through this analysis, it's pretty clear that Google doesn't have very many fundamental weaknesses, if any at all, and that its business model is pretty much as good as it gets. And so once you do this type of analysis, you can get really comfortable around the company and around the stock. And this is going to lead me into book number 4, which is called One Up on Wall Street by Peter Lynch. Now, Peter Lynch was the fund manager of Fidelity's Magellan Fund. It was basically the flagship fund and also the most successful fund at Fidelity. And his track record is really second to none. It's up there with Buffett. The major difference is that he only did it for about 15 or 20 years, whereas Buffett's been doing it for 60 or 70 years. Now, I read this book in college when I was still a novice investor. And, I've been investing since high school. But this book really made investing fun, easy, and relevant for me. It shows how easy and how simple it can really be. It's a perfect introduction to investing for beginners, but it's also a great reminder to more experienced investors that we often overcomplicate things. Now, this book is all about keeping it simple and investing in companies you know and love. This is actually what led me to invest in Amazon and Google, which are the two stocks I talked about earlier that changed my life. Now, those two early successes in my investing career provided for me the model for how I was going to be as an investor, and it also provided me with the capital to enjoy the financial freedom I have today. Those two stocks also led me to investing in other stocks that were similar to them. So for instance, I loved Amazon's business model so much that I said, what is the next Amazon? I couldn't find it in most of the world. I had to go all the way to China to find Alibaba and JD.com. Number 5, Rich Dad, Poor Dad by Robert Kiyosaki. Now, this book teaches you the millionaire mindset. And what I mean by that is a couple of different things. Number 1, focusing on building multiple streams of income. And number 2, thinking of everything as an asset or a liability and focusing on buying assets, not liabilities. Said another way, it's focusing on producing and not consuming. Now, Robert has this really interesting cash flow quadrant that he talks about. And basically the concept there is about selling your time for money versus passive income where you can use your money to make more money. So let's talk about the 4 quadrants and which ones you want to be in. So the first one is an employee, which is basically having a job. The second one is being self-employed, where you own a job. So in both of these, you're trading your time for money. Now, the third quadrant is being a business owner, where you own a business, right? So you're buying time from others to make money. And then finally, the fourth quadrant is being an investor, where money works for you. So you use money to make more money. Now, these last two can be done on a passive basis and can be very, very powerful in terms of creating streams of income. And then finally, number 6, again here I've got 2 books, but this time they're by the same author. It's The 4-Hour Workweek and 4-Hour Body by Tim Ferriss. So Tim's done the work and the experiments to simplify your life across lots of areas. In the 4-Hour Workweek, basically he says, create businesses that can operate without you so you can make passive income. This sounds a lot like what we heard from in Robert Kiyosaki's book. And then outsource as much as possible the non-value added tasks. In the 4-Hour Body, he basically tells you the best way to lose weight and get in shape. And the best takeaway that I got from that book was essentially this program that he created where 6 days of the week you eat super healthy with minimal to no carbs, and then you have one cheat day where you can basically eat anything you want. And now the key nuance here is to track your daily progress. And so I actually did this, and I tracked my daily progress, and I can tell you it was extremely addictive. I saw results within the first day. In the first day of doing this, I lost 1 pound. And overall, I did this for several months. I lost about 25 pounds. I decreased my cholesterol, triglycerides, and blood glucose levels by 20 to 30%. Now, if you're interested, I have a video about my routine. It's really easy, pretty fun, and it's based on the 4-Hour Body, and it worked really well for me. All right, now moving on to the honorable mentions. I've got 5 different categories here. The first one is investing. The books here are The Intelligent Investor by Benjamin Graham, Security Analysis by Graham and Dodd, Margin of Safety by Seth Klarman, The Most Important Thing by Howard Marks, and Black Swan by Nassim Taleb. So if you're serious about investing and specifically value investing, then the first two books are must-reads. The Intelligent Investor and Security Analysis are basically the Bibles of value investing. Now, they're not easy reads. They can be technical and challenging at times, but they're well worth it. Now, Margin of Safety is also a value investing classic, but it's a much more difficult book to find. You can't find it in print. You'd probably have to search the internet to get some PDF of it. And basically the summary there is buy things for way less than you think they're worth. And that is effectively how you create your margin of safety. Now, the most important thing by Howard Marks, the key takeaway I got from that one was that markets are like a pendulum. They swing between depression and euphoria. And your job is to figure out where we are on that pendulum and position your portfolio accordingly. And finally, Black Swan by Nassim Taleb basically tells you to prepare for the unexpected, these black swan events like 9/11 or the Great Financial Crisis. It's really well written, it's entertaining, it's thought-provoking, but it is almost 600 pages long, so it is a very big one. Now moving on to motivation and self-improvement. Now, motivation and self-improvement is something that I think more people should focus on. And these books basically push you to do more and to be the best person that you can be. Now, the first three I would group together. It's Awaken the Giant Within by Tony Robbins, 7 Habits of Highly Effective People by Stephen Covey, and Think and Grow Rich by Napoleon Hill. Basically, the key takeaways from these are threefold. 1, they'll motivate you to be a better you every day. Number 2, focus on controlling what you can and don't worry about the rest. And then finally, number 3, the power of positive thinking and the law of attraction. And the summary here is if you don't believe in yourself, nobody else will, right? Why should they? And whether you think you deserve something or not, you're right either way. And then the last book here I have is Man's Search for Meaning by Viktor Frankl. It's a truly inspirational story about overcoming extreme adversity and the power and resilience of humans. And, what's really interesting about this one is, if you're going through a tough time, reading this book really puts things in perspective that no matter how bad things are in your life, other people in the world have gone through much more horrific things and have survived and in some cases even thrived. Now moving on to the next section, business biographies. I've got 3 books here. Shoe Dog by Phil Knight, Principles by Ray Dalio, and What It Takes by Steve Schwartzman. Now, I think business biographies are incredible things because you get to learn from others. And here I've got 3 stories of guys that came from nothing to become the best in their fields and absolute business icons. So I think it's always great to hear from people who've achieved at the highest levels. Now, they're writing these books to give back their knowledge. It's not to generate book sales. They don't need the money. And all of these were written when they were in their late 60s or 70s. They essentially serve as reflection of what they've learned over their 40 to 50-year careers. Now, if you don't know who they are, Phil Knight is the founder of Nike. His net worth is about $40 billion. Steve Schwartzman is the founder of Blackstone, which is the leading private equity fund, and in my opinion, probably the best alternative asset manager in the world. His net worth is about $20 billion. And then finally, Ray Dalio, who's the founder of Bridgewater, which is the biggest and most successful hedge fund. He's worth about $18 billion. Moving on to the next section, I call this social and emotional intelligence. Now, they don't teach you social and emotional intelligence in high school or college. Some people are naturally born with it, but most aren't. And so the first book I have here is How to Win Friends and Influence People by Dale Carnegie. Now, this book is incredible because it teaches you how to be more likable. And what's great about this book is it could very well not only make others like you more, but it might actually make you like you more. The next book is Influence, The Psychology of Persuasion by Robert Cialdini. And now, psychology is one of the most important parts of business and investing. And having a high EQ starts with understanding the basics of social psychology. And in my opinion, this is the most important book ever written on that subject. And now the last two are The Art of War by Sun Tzu and The 48 Laws of Power by Robert Greene. Now, I put these two in a similar category as Influence by Robert Cialdini. But these ones are much more Machiavellian in nature and take a zero-sum game or highly competitive angle to power and influence. So I don't necessarily recommend following all of the advice in these books because frankly some of them are pretty deceitful. But I do think it's vital to be aware of them so that they don't get used on you. And then finally, the last section, fiction, I chose What Men Live By and Other Tales by Leo Tolstoy. Now, this is a collection of 4 short stories over 124 pages. So it's amazingly quick and entertaining to read, and it'll really make you think, and you'll want to reread them over and over again, I promise you. What was so great about this book, to me, was it really was a pathway into the world of Tolstoy and Dostoevsky and other great authors and classics, that are not quite as approachable. Those other books are, 900 pages, 1,000 pages, and they're written in a much more difficult language, whereas this is really, really approachable, super fun read. I promise you'll love this book. So that's it, guys. I hope you enjoyed today's video and found it helpful. If you did, please make sure to like the video. And as always, thanks for watching. Stay safe and have an awesome day.